I'm James Lynch, and this is my stock report for UFC Vegas 86, where I take a look at the biggest winners and losers from the event. And the biggest winner on this card for me was Jack Hermanson. Really big win for him, coming in as a plus 210 underdog. Didn't look like it last night. That veteran experience paying off, getting the decision victory over a really good up-and-coming fighter in Joe Pyfer. I thought this was an incredible performance from Jack. He had a lot of pressure going into this one. He came off that really disappointing loss to Roman Dolidze. He had a long layoff. There were a lot of reasons not to like Jack in this fight, and I'll fully admit I did not pick the right side here, although I did mention on the preview show that this is a fight you needed to be careful with, and it certainly played out the way I thought it would if Jack was going to win, and that was winning a decision because of that veteran experience and the fact that Pyfer, we haven't seen him go the full 5 rounds in a fight before, so I thought that was very interesting going in. But I just like the composure here from Hermanson. A lot of fighters early on might get discouraged. You know, you're not winning those early rounds, but Hermanson turning the tide, like I said, in that 3rd round and going in and getting the decision win there. And to me, this just sort of reignited Jack Hermanson's career. I mean, I think we forget a little bit about Jack Hermanson's, record in the UFC. He's fought some really good competition, and he's actually got some good wins as well. I mean, one that really stands out to me is the Kelvin Gastelum win. I know that was in 2020, and that was 4 years ago, but he was one of the few guys to finish Kelvin Gastelum in that fight. And you look at some of the losses here. Cannonier, Vittori was short notice, lost to Sean Strickland, not a bad loss there. I think if he fought Dolidze now, he could potentially win that rematch. So, this is a guy that basically revived his career at 35 years of age, and he wants Nasruddin Imavov next. I'm totally down with that. Same sort of situation, I think, in a way, where they have an up-and-coming fighter, a younger middleweight that Hermanson could take out and move his way back to the contender spot. And, look at the smile here. This guy is one of the nicest guys in the industry. You never hear anyone saying anything bad for him. That was a cool moment last night, him getting that victory. And so Jack Hermanson, for me, his stock rose the most on this card just because of what he had going in. If he would have lost this fight, I'm sure he would have got another one after this, but when you start losing to contenders, that's typically when the UFC has a really short leash on your contract. So Hermanson kind of reviving his career here with the big win over Joe Pyfer. We'll talk about Pyfer a little bit later here, but the other big winner on this card to me and whose stock went up for me has to be Dan Ige. And it's not just the fact that Dan Ige won because he was the betting favorite going into the fight, minus 175. It's the fact that he won by knockout in the 1st round. This is a really impressive win for Dan Ige there. You can see 2 minutes and 43 seconds in round 1. What did we hear after his last fight? Oh, Dan Ige's not that good. He lost to Bryce Mitchell, all this stuff, right? Ige is one of these guys, though, works really hard, doesn't excel in one particular area, but he can usually get it done against a lot of these guys in the weight class, like Nate Landwehr, Damon Jackson. Had a bad night against Bryce, but outside of that, he's looked pretty good. And a similar situation to Jack Hermanson, you look at his losses, they're against pretty good competition here. Korean Zombies won, he probably should have won, but Josh Emmett, Ivoyev might be fighting for a title next. These aren't bad losses for Ige, and I think this is exactly what he needs to do to get people's attention in the division, is get a finish like this. Andre Fili doesn't get finished all the time, so for Ige to do this in the 1st round, I think this is a huge boost to his career. If you look at the rankings right now, Dan Ige currently ranked number 13. I'd say you could do the winner of Sodiq Yusuff and Diego Lopez. I think that would be an interesting one. There are a few options for him here. Maybe do the loser of Calvin Kattar and Aljamain Sterling. But either way, Dan Ige is another guy that you just like to see progress on. He works really hard. He's a guy that, you can definitely see was not given any sort of amazing talents, but he's a guy that works really hard in the gym. That's what a lot of people at Extreme say. So good for Dan Ige getting the 1st round finish and raising his stock last night on that event. Okay, the next one I'm going with here for the another big stock riser on this card, to me, is Rodolfo Vieira. And look, again, similar situation. He was a favorite going in, a slight favorite at minus 120. I saw a lot of people heading into this fight saying Armen Petrosyan's going to knock him out. Armen Petrosyan, he is the future of this division. I heard there's one guy in my live chat who talks about this guy being the dark horse in the weight class. Okay, here was a prime opportunity for him to prove that in this fight, and he couldn't do it. And Vieira goes out there and gets a 1st round submission. Now, I know there's a bit of controversy with how this finished with the submission. He tapped. I'm sorry, he did tap in this fight. Are people arguing that Armen did not tap in this fight? I don't know what to tell you. There was 2 clear taps there. Vieira getting the win again. I guess the reason for me that I put Vieira, a little bit hyped up more from this win is the fact that, he did it quickly. He did it in the 1st round. He's 34. Like, he kind of needed to do this. It's kind of now or never. And he's had a few setbacks in the UFC. Remember the Anthony Hernandez fight? They referenced it last night in the broadcast. Kind of embarrassing, right? You get submitted by a guy that's not really known for his jiu-jitsu, and Anthony Hernandez. And then he lost to Chris Curtis, who I think's still a very good fighter in that weight class and performs quite well. But this was sort of the first big win he's had. Stolfus and Brundage, nothing against these guys, but they're not exactly, and and even going back further, Safarov, these aren't exactly guys that are like, lighting the world on fire. But Petrosyan's one of those guys that, while he was inconsistent, he's still a guy that had some solid wins going into this fight. So Vieira getting the first round sub for me definitely rose his stock in this card, and very interesting to see where he goes from here. But like I said, to me, the big thing here is the age. The fact that he won so quickly. You got to perform quite well. Otherwise, there's going to be a shorter leash with guys that are a little bit older, getting to their mid-30s like Vieira is in this fight. So big win there for Rodolfo Vieira. Quick honorable mention as far as stock rising. How about Hyder Emil? UFC debut, goes through 3 opponents. I know he was favored going into this fight. I believe on the actual preview show I did, Tapology had the odds wrong. I think they're still going to display them wrong here. Yeah, they had him as an underdog. That's not what happened. If you look at Hyder Emil here on the odds, he was actually the favorite going in. Every now and then Tapology messes this up. But if you look here, Hyder Emil, if you look at his odds on best fight odds, just want to point this out because I do think this is interesting. Oh, is it going to do the thing where it doesn't show up? Well, you can kind of see it here. No, I guess you can't see it. Best fight odds is acting up. Either way, I know Hyder Emil was the favorite going in there last night. So he was expected to win. It's just the fact he was so dominant, and he finished Fernie Garcia, right? You look at Garcia's last couple losses, they were mainly decision losses here, right? The go out there and finish him in the second round really opened some people's eyes. So Hyder Emil, for me, also gets an honorable mention here on our stock report. Okay, let's get to the biggest losers, or I hate using the word losers. It sounds kind of harsh, but the biggest setbacks, or the fighters whose stock definitely dropped on this card. And we're going to start with Andre Fili. I know people might say Joe Pyfer. We'll talk about him in a sec, but to me, it's Fili. I mean, this is a veteran that's been in the UFC for a while, 33 years old. And, he was coming off a loss 2 fights ago, but he was also coming off a big knockout win. Like, you thought that Fili was turning the corner. The fight that I always come back to is the Joanderson Brito fight, gets finished in 41 seconds. That's kind of where you're like, okay, like, now we're starting to maybe see the decline of Fili. But he had a bit of life, won that Bill Algeo fight close, could have gone either way, lost to Nathaniel Wood. But you thought with the Lucas Almeida fight, okay, we're seeing a progression here in Fili, and maybe he's getting back to where he was before, which was kind of hovering around the rankings. This was a good opportunity here. But for him to get finished in the first round now, that's 36% of his losses now by knockout, 45% by decision. So, the second most ways he seems to lose is by knockout now. And at 33, like, where does he go from here? And it's not like Dan Ige, as much as I was praising him before, it's not like Dan Ige is a contender in the weight class. He's a lower ranked middleweight. I just think it's pretty much it for Andre Fili trying to make his way into the rankings. I think that's going to be really tough for him now. This is a big setback for him. And, the knockouts add up. Like he's now been knocked out. If you look at his last, 4 fights, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, last 5 fights, he's been knocked out in the first round in 2 of them. That's not good, especially for a guy who's 33. If your chin starts to go, it's very problematic here. So, again, I like Fili a lot. Would love to see him bounce back. I'm actually thinking maybe him and Nate Landwehr would be a fun fight next, just because they both lost to Ige. But, yeah, tough loss there for Andre Fili. So his stock has certainly gone down. Okay, let's get to... I know this is going to be a little bit of a longer stock report, but I got a lot to say here. Joe Pyfer is also someone whose stock went down. But here's the thing. He's not my biggest stock dropper on this card, because going in, I know people were hyping him up. I know there's probably even some people saying, oh, future contender, future champion. We hear that all the time when it comes to, guys that are performing well against the competition they're facing. But I didn't have a lot of expectations for Pyfer in this fight. In fact, I talked about the fact that if the fight went a bit longer, like I referenced earlier, I didn't think it was going to look that great for him, because we just haven't seen him go 5 rounds. I cut Pyfer a bit of slack here because this is his first 5-round fight. And let's get real here. Going from his last opponent, which was Razak Al-Hassan, to Jack Hermanson is a pretty big leap if you think about it, right? Like, Razak Al-Hassan has never been ranked at middleweight. He's not even been close to the rankings at middleweight. So going from him to Hermanson, I cut him a bit of slack. I think it was a case of where, people are underestimating Hermanson. Pyfer had not had that 5-round experience. I don't think he looked bad in this fight. I just think, the experience showed, and I think he does need to work on a few things here, but I don't think he had the biggest stock drop on this card, because I think, honestly, going in, we were just looking for those answers, but I think going in, we knew that there wasn't enough really to back him up as this, future contender and all that. I know the UFC's obviously disappointed. You like to see the up-and-comers come through and get like a big knockout or performance here to sort of move along in the division, but look, for Pyfer, he's 27 years old. There's time for him to figure this out. And it's not like he was like not in this fight at all. He looked good early on, just ran out of steam, the tide turned, but I don't think he's a big stock dropper as far as I'm concerned. I'm mentioning him here because I have to. He's the main event, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement here for Joe Pyfer, and I think there's plenty of room for him to sort of turn it around. And again, the good news about this fight is he didn't look like he didn't belong in there, right? Sometimes we see, like I always reference the Yair Rodriguez and Frankie Edgar fight from a couple of years ago. That was a fight that looked like Yair didn't belong in there. and that's where he had a big layoff and he figured it out and he got back to title contention. But I think Pfeiffer, at the very least, he did not look out of place here. So Pfeiffer, unfortunately, his stock did drop a bit, but I don't think it was the worst one. I think Fili, to me, is the number one. And then the third one is a guy I referenced earlier here. And again, it's just because of the expectations, and that's Petr Yan. Good opportunity for him to upset a guy that I think he was beatable. And at 33, same thing. It's like, where do you go from here? He had a nice win streak coming into this. 2 straight wins, lost to Borrello. Now, Borrello, I think very highly of. I think that's a guy we're going to be talking about in that contender spot here pretty soon. But, I mean, you look at some of the wins. He had a win over Gregory Rodriguez, won on Contender Series. Like, he had a 2-fight win streak coming into this, and to lose like this in the first round, that's a tough setback for him. So, at 33, I don't know where he really goes. Like, that's the problem. Like, he doesn't have a lot of time to figure this out and make a run in the middleweight division when you're losing fights like this in the first round. And granted, you know, you're fighting a really good jiu-jitsu guy, but still, I think his stock certainly dropped on this card, and it's like, what do you do with him now? I mean, when you have a guy that's in, like, I mean, I guess he's not that old, he's 33, but when you have a guy like this who's lost like a key fight like this, now it's starting to be, well, what do you do with them? The UFC is probably going to want to use other guys to build his name off of. I think that's where we're at when you lose a key fight like this. So yeah, tough loss there for Petr Yan, who does not get in the column as well. And one last one I'll mention is my honorable mention. We always do that here. The other honorable mention for me is Darius Flowers. You had a good opportunity here to beat a veteran here in Michael Johnson, who was coming off a loss in this fight. And at 29, you think we would have seen a little bit more effort. I believe he missed weight for this fight as well, or at least came close to, well, they didn't miss weight in this one. But yeah, Darius Flowers, I thought he could have performed better in this one. I thought that was an opportunity for him to beat Michael Johnson, turn back the clock. Couldn't do it. So this was another stock drop for me. It was Darius Flowers. I don't know how much stock he had going in, but you would think there was a prime opportunity there for him to take out Michael Johnson. So as always, I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you agree with my stock report here? Whose stock do you think rose the most, and whose stock do you think dropped the most on this card? Would love to hear from you. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, at Lynch on Sports. This is the stock report. I try and do these after every card. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe like it said on the screen there. Hit that like button as well. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.